The melody always returns in the darkest hour, haunting, familiar, yet just beyond understanding. Germany, 1970. A bloodied hand scrawls musical notes on rain-soaked paper as helicopter rotors thrum overhead. The coordinates to genocide hidden in plain sight, disguised as a love song, Boston, present day. Three lives orbit each other like planets tethered to a dying star. A billionaire media mogul with war secrets burning holes in his conscience. A folk singer whose voice once moved thousands now teaches in church basements. And a composer haunted by music he's never heard but somehow remembers. Some melodies can't be silenced. Some truths refuse to stay buried. Some blood ties are stronger than the lies woven to sever them. When powerful men decide that silence is worth killing for, the only salvation lies in a code hidden within the notes of a forgotten lullaby, a melody that has traveled across decades, whispering of betrayal, sacrifice, and the ghosts of a war that never truly ended. The past isn't finished with any of them. It's only been waiting for the right moment to play the final movement. The stage lights at St. Patrick's Cathedral cast a golden glow across Catherine Reynolds' face as her fingers moved across the piano keys with practiced grace. At 58, the lines around her eyes had deepened. Her once fiery red hair now streaked with dignified silver. But her hands, those hands that had once strummed guitars in smoky bars across America during the folk revival of the 80s, remained as nimble as ever. "Music is our collective memory," Catherine told the assembled crowd, her voice carrying through the cathedral's perfect acoustics. "It remembers what we try to forget, heals what we thought was broken beyond repair." From the back of the cathedral, Jonathan Hayes watched her, a tumbler of whiskey from the charity event's open bar clutched in his hand. At 65, he still carried himself with the rigid posture ingrained during his military service, back straight, shoulders squared, face carefully composed into the mask of confidence expected from the CEO of Atlantic Media Group. But something in Catherine's voice made his carefully constructed facade crack slightly. "Remarkable woman," commented Richard Dalton, the bank executive standing beside him. "Hard to believe she once opened for Dylan and Baez." Jonathan's grip tightened on his glass. "I knew her before." "Before what?" "Before everything," Jonathan replied, his eyes never leaving Catherine. On stage, Catherine transitioned to a haunting melody that seemed to still the restless crowd. The benefit concert for Germany veterans and their families had drawn Boston's elite, people who wrote large checks to ease conscience or build social capital. Catherine had agreed to perform despite her complicated feelings about such events, the way they often sanitize the messy legacy of a war that had torn the nation apart. In the front row, Eleanor Washington nodded in quiet appreciation. At 75, the former jazz pianist's hands were now gnarled with arthritis, but her mind remained sharp as the notes she once played in Harlem clubs. She'd become Catherine's mentor, confidant, and surrogate mother since that rainy day in 1991 when Catherine had shown up at her door, pregnant and alone. The first wisp of smoke was so faint that most ignored it, a mere ghost curling along the cathedral's ancient ceiling. Then came the distant pop of electrical systems failing, followed by the unmistakable smell of burning wiring. Eleanor noticed it first, her eyes tracking upward toward the ornate lighting fixtures above the choir loft. "Fire!" someone whispered, the word rippling through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Catherine continued playing, her eyes finding Eleanor's, a silent question passing between them. Eleanor gave an almost imperceptible nod toward the exit. Catherine segued smoothly into the final chord progression, preparing to announce an orderly evacuation. That's when the antique chandelier, weakened by the flames spreading through the ceiling's electrical system, broke free from its moorings with a sickening crack. "Look out!" Catherine shouted, abandoning the piano and lunging toward a young boy who stood directly beneath the falling fixture. Time seemed to slow. Catherine's body collided with the child's, pushing him clear as the massive chandelier crashed onto the stage in a shower of crystal, metal, and sparks. The impact sent her sprawling across the hardwood floor, a shard of crystal slicing her forearm. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Everyone moved calmly toward the exits. Jonathan's voice cut through the panic, decades of command experience evident in his tone. Security, help the elderly ushers, guide people to the side doors. As smoke thickened near the ceiling, the sprinkler system finally engaged, sending cascades of water down upon the panicked crowd, the priceless organ, and the centuries-old pews. Catherine struggled to her feet, clutching her bleeding arm, searching for Eleanor in the confusion. Jonathan moved against the tide of fleeing concert-goers, his eyes fixed on Catherine. When he reached the stage, he shrugged off his suit jacket and pressed it against her bleeding arm. "We need to get out," he said, his voice close to her ear. Catherine looked up, recognition dawning in her eyes. Jonathan. After 33 years, his name on her lips still carried the weight of everything that had broken between them. "Later," he said, guiding her toward the nearest exit. "Eleanor's already outside. Come on." As sirens wailed in the distance, they emerged into the cool Boston night, joining the crowd gathered on the cathedral steps. Jonathan maintained his grip on Catherine's arm, applying pressure to the wound. "You know," Catherine said, her voice steady despite the chaos, "this isn't exactly how I imagined running into you again." Jonathan's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "No. I always pictured something more dramatic." He gestured to the burning cathedral behind them. "This isn't dramatic enough for you." For a moment, the years between them seemed to evaporate. Then reality reasserted itself as paramedics approached, breaking their connection to treat Catherine's injury. "Mr. Hayes," his security detail appeared at his side. "Your car is ready." Jonathan hesitated, watching as the paramedics led Catherine toward an ambulance. "Sir, the press is arriving. We should go before they corner you." With a last glance at Catherine, Jonathan allowed himself to be guided away, the collar of his shirt stained with her blood. Marcus Hayes stared at the musical notation on his computer screen, the familiar frustration building behind his eyes. At 32, he'd built a respectable career composing scores for independent films and documentaries. But tonight, the notes refused to cooperate. The melody in his head, the one that had haunted him since childhood, kept interfering with the composition he was trying to create for American Dissonance, a documentary about the anti-war movement of the 1970s. His spacious apartment in Cambridge overlooked the Charles River, the lights of Boston twinkling across the water. The space was minimalist and modern, all clean lines and monochromatic furnishings, reflecting the ordered existence Marcus had constructed to contain the chaos that always threatened at the edges of his mind. Running his fingers through his dark hair, Marcus stood and moved to the baby grand piano by the window, the one extravagance he'd allowed himself when his career had begun to gain traction. His fingers found the keys automatically, playing the haunting melody that surfaced in his dreams. During anxiety attacks, in moments of deepest stress, the piece had no name, no beginning, no end, just a haunting progression that felt like memory but couldn't possibly be. He'd never found its source, though he'd spent years searching through classical catalogs, folk collections, even obscure lullabies. His phone buzzed with a text from his father, watching the news fire at St. Patrick's during the benefit. "I'm fine. Call tomorrow." Marcus felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the anxiety that always accompanied communications from Jonathan Hayes. Their relationship had improved in recent years, but there remained an emotional distance neither seemed able to bridge. Jonathan had raised Marcus alone after Victoria, his ex-wife and Marcus's mother, had abandoned them when Marcus was just 3 years old. While Jonathan had provided stability and opportunities, emotional warmth had never been his strong suit. Marcus was about to respond when a news alert flashed across his laptop. "Fire breaks out at Veterans Benefit Concert. Atlantic Media CEO Jonathan Hayes among attendees." The accompanying video showed the cathedral with smoke billowing from its windows, crowds evacuating, and Marcus leaned closer, a woman being led to an ambulance. his father briefly visible beside her before disappearing into the crowd. Something about the woman caught Marcus's attention. He zoomed in on the footage, studying her face, the high cheekbones, the determined set of her jaw, the silver-streaked red hair, something naggingly familiar. His phone rang. Sophia, his girlfriend of 6 months. "Are you seeing this?" she asked without preamble. "Your dad was at that fire." He texted, "He's fine." Marcus continued staring at the frozen image of the woman. "Do you know who she is?" "The pianist, Catherine Reynolds." "How do you not know Catherine Reynolds?" "She was huge in folk music back in the day. My mom has all her albums." Sophia paused. "Why?" "Just curious. She looks familiar somehow." "Well, she's been teaching at that community music program near Fenway, the one for veterans and at-risk kids. My cousin's son takes lessons there." Marcus felt a strange pull, like a compass needle finding north. "What's it called?" "Harmony Project. I think." "Marcus, are you okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine and just distracted with this score." He glanced at the musical notation for his haunting melody, still open on his piano. "I think I might check out that music program." After hanging up, Marcus returned to the piano, playing the melody once more, as he stared at the frozen image of Catherine Reynolds on his screen. Something connected these puzzle pieces. He was sure of it. The melody, the woman, his father at the same event. Coincidence felt too convenient an explanation. His fingers faltered on the keys as a wave of dizziness washed over him. The familiar tightness in his chest intensified, his breathing growing shallow. Marcus recognized the symptoms of an impending anxiety attack and reached for the prescription bottle on the coffee table, swallowing a pill dry. As he waited for the medication to take effect, he forced himself to breathe deeply, counting beats as his therapist had taught him. Gradually, the room stopped spinning, but the questions remained, circling like sharks in the dark waters of his mind. Jonathan Hayes's penthouse apartment occupied the top floor of one of Boston's most exclusive buildings, offering panoramic views of the city he'd conquered through decades of strategic business moves. Tonight, however, he stood at the wall of windows without seeing the glittering cityscape, a tumbler of scotch in his hand, his mind 33 years in the past. Catherine Reynolds, the name he'd trained himself not to think about, not to react to when it appeared in entertainment news or music retrospectives. And yet, seeing her in person had unraveled years of careful compartmentalization in an instant. His security system chimed, announcing a visitor. Jonathan checked his watch. Nearly midnight, and moved to the security panel, surprised to see his executive assistant, David Chen, on the monitor. "Let him up," Jonathan instructed the system, setting down his drink and straightening his posture, automatically reassuming the role of CEO, even at this late hour. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, David stepped out, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, his expression grave. "This couldn't wait until morning?" Jonathan asked, though he already knew the answer. "There's been a security breach at the office," David said, removing a tablet from his messenger bag. "Someone accessed the executive vault around 8 p.m. during the benefit concert." Jonathan's expression hardened. "That's impossible. The biometric protocols were bypassed using your credentials," David finished. "The system registered your thumbprint and retinal scan." "I was at St. Patrick's." "I know, that's why I'm here instead of calling the police." David hesitated. "Sir, they only accessed one set of files, the classified documents from your military service. Specifically, the Phoenix Project materials." Jonathan went utterly still. "Show me the security footage." David handed him the tablet, cued to the vault's security feed. The timestamp showed 8:17 p.m., precisely when Catherine had been performing. The figure on screen wore maintenance coveralls and kept their face angled away from the cameras. But their movements were efficient, practiced. They knew exactly what they were looking for. They used a synthetic print and a high-resolution contact lens for the retinal scan, David explained. Military-grade technology, not something an ordinary thief would have access to. No, Jonathan agreed, his voice distant. Not ordinary at all. He set the tablet down. Decision made. Increase security at all locations. Change all access protocols immediately. And David, sir, have Blackwood meet me tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. David's expression betrayed nothing, but his hesitation spoke volumes. Blackwood was Jonathan's contact from his military days. A man whose name appeared in no employee records, whose services were engaged only in the most sensitive situations. Is that wise, sir, given the nature of what was taken? That will be all. David. After his assistant departed, Jonathan returned to the window, but instead of reaching for his abandoned scotch, he moved to a seemingly solid section of wall near the fireplace. A press of his hand against a hidden panel revealed a small safe. Inside lay a weathered leather case, which he removed with careful hands. The guitar inside wasn't particularly valuable by collector standards, a 1967 Martin D18 well played, but lovingly maintained. Jonathan ran his fingers over the strings, producing a soft, discordant sound. He hadn't properly played in decades, but tonight, with Catherine's reappearance and the theft of his classified files, the past seemed determined to resurrect itself. His phone rang a blocked number. Jonathan stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hayes. Hello. Captain? Said a voice he didn't recognize, electronically distorted. Or should I say, CEO Hayes now. How far you've come from Saigon? Jonathan's military training kicked in immediately. He activated the phone's recording function with a subtle gesture, his voice betraying nothing. Who is this? Someone who knows what you did. Someone who knows about the village, about Operation Falling Phoenix, about the real reason Catherine Reynolds left you. Jonathan's knuckles whitened around the phone. What do you want? Justice, eventually. But for now, I want you to understand that your carefully constructed life is made of cards. Captain Hayes, and I'm about to start pulling them down, one by one. If you've accessed classified information, you've committed a federal offense. Blackmail is, a harsh laugh cut him off. Save the corporate threats. They won't work on me. Here's what will happen. You'll receive instructions. Follow them, and maybe your son won't discover what kind of man his father really is. The call disconnected. Jonathan stood motionless, the phone still pressed to his ear, the mention of Marcus landing like a physical blow. After a moment, he set the phone down and returned to the guitar case. But instead of replacing the instrument, he lifted the velvet lining to reveal a hidden compartment containing a single key and a yellowed photograph Jonathan and Catherine in 1969, his arm around her shoulders. Both laughing into the camera, the jungles of Germany visible in the background. He'd kept one secret from everyone in his life. Catherine hadn't just been his girlfriend. She'd been his wife, if only for 6 short months during his tour in Germany, where she'd performed for the troops as part of a USO-adjacent program. Their marriage had ended shortly after his transfer to the Phoenix Project, when the idealistic young musician discovered the nature of her husband's new assignment. The divorce had been quick, quiet, and devastating. Jonathan had returned to his intelligence work with a newfound ruthlessness, burying his heart alongside his wedding ring. By the time he returned stateside and met Victoria, the model who would become his second wife and Marcus's mother, the young man who had loved music and Catherine Reynolds existed only in classified photographs and redacted reports. Or so he'd thought. Jonathan placed the key in his pocket and carefully returned the guitar to its case. Whatever game the blackmailer was playing, they'd made a critical error in threatening Marcus. Jonathan Hayes might have buried his heart decades ago, but when it came to his son, he would tear the world apart to keep him safe, even if that meant finally confronting the ghosts of Germany. The Harmony Project occupied a renovated warehouse in a transitional neighborhood near Fenway Park. The building's industrial exterior belied the warmth within walls painted in soothing blues and greens, practice rooms soundproofed with professional-grade materials, and a small performance space equipped with state-of-the-art acoustics. Catherine sat in her office, wincing slightly as she adjusted the bandage on her arm. The cut from the cathedral hadn't required stitches, but it stung more than she cared to admit. "You should be home resting," Eleanor scolded gently from the doorway, a cup of tea in her outstretched hand. "And Mrs. Abernathy's breakthrough with Chopin. Not a chance." Catherine accepted the tea gratefully. "Besides, staying busy keeps me from thinking about him." Eleanor settled into the chair across from Catherine's desk, her movements deliberate, conserving energy as septuagenarians learn to do. 33 years is a long time to maintain that level of avoidance. Perhaps the universe is suggesting it's time to resolve things. Catherine snorted. "The universe has a twisted sense of timing. Then, does it?" Eleanor raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Marcus Hayes registered for our adult program this morning. Session starts next week." The teacup froze halfway to Catherine's lips. "What? Marcus Hayes, son of Jonathan Hayes. You're as... I know who he is." Catherine interrupted sharply. She set the cup down with trembling hands. "Why would he... How did he... He said he's working on a documentary about the anti-war movement and wants to improve his piano technique for the score he's composing." Eleanor's steady gaze held Catherine's. "He specifically requested you as his teacher." Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. "He can't know. There's no way he knows. Perhaps not consciously, but blood recognizes blood. Catherine, music recognizes its source." Eleanor leaned forward. "I've watched you sacrifice everything to protect that boy from afar. Maybe it's time to consider that he's been searching for you too, whether he realizes it or not." Before Catherine could respond, there was a knock at the open door. Both women turned to see a tall, slender man with dark hair and intensely blue eyes, Jonathan's eyes, standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said, his gaze moving between them. "The receptionist said I might find Catherine Reynolds here. I'm Marcus Hayes." Catherine rose from her chair, steadying herself against the desk. Up close, the resemblance to Jonathan was striking, though Marcus had her cheekbones, her pianist's hands. "Mr. Hayes," she managed, extending her hand. "You're early. Your first lesson isn't until next week." "I know." He shook her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I was hoping to discuss something with you. It's about a melody I've been trying to identify." Eleanor stood, making a show of checking her watch. "I should get to my class. Lovely to meet you. Mr. Hayes, I'm Eleanor Washington." Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his serious face. "The Eleanor Washington from the Blue Note recordings? My father has your albums." A shadow passed over Eleanor's face, so quickly most would have missed it. "How lovely. Please tell him I'm flattered." She squeezed Catherine's shoulder as she passed. "Breathe," she whispered, alone with Marcus. Catherine gestured to the chair Eleanor had vacated. "Please sit. Tell me about this melody." Marcus settled into the chair, a nervous energy radiating from him. "It's probably nothing. I've been told I'm somewhat obsessive about these things." "Music is worth being obsessive about," Catherine replied, finding her professional demeanor despite the emotional turmoil beneath. "This particular piece," Marcus hesitated. "I've had it in my head for as long as I can remember. I dream about it. When I'm anxious, it's there. I've searched everywhere: classical catalogs, folk archives, film scores, but I've never found it." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Then last night, I saw you on the news, at the cathedral fire, and I had this feeling." Catherine's mouth went dry. "What kind of feeling?" "Like I knew you, like you might understand." He shook his head. "I know how that sounds. Would you play it for me?" Catherine asked, gesturing to the upright piano against the wall. "The melody." Marcus moved to the piano with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent thousands of hours at the keyboard. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before beginning to play. The notes that filled the room sent a shock through Catherine's body. The melody was unmistakable, the lullaby she'd composed while pregnant with him, the one she'd hummed against his infant head during those precious 6 weeks before the custody arrangement had forced her to let him go. But that wasn't all. Marcus had altered it, developed it, adding complex harmonies and counterpoints that transformed her simple lullaby into something haunting and beautiful, something that bridged the decades of silence between them. Catherine realized she'd stopped breathing only when her lungs began to burn. She inhaled sharply, drawing Marcus's attention. "You recognize it?" he asked, hope and confusion mingling in his expression. Before she could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal everything, her phone buzzed with a text message. Normally, Catherine would have ignored it, but the momentary distraction was welcome. She glanced at the screen and froze. "I know your son found you. The past always returns, doesn't it?" Kate asked Hayes about Phoenix. "Ask him about the villages, or I will." The text came from an unknown number. "Miss Reynolds, are you all right? You've gone pale." Catherine looked up to find Marcus watching her with concern, Jonathan's eyes in a face that echoed her own. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. "Just a reminder about a deadline. As for your melody, it does sound vaguely familiar. Perhaps something from the folk revival period. Let me do some research." Marcus seemed disappointed but nodded. "Of course. I should let you get back to work." He stood, retrieving a business card from his wallet. "My contact information, for our lessons, or if you find anything about the melody." Catherine accepted the card, careful not to let their fingers touch. "I'll be in touch, Mr. Hayes." After he left, Catherine sank back into her chair, the mysterious text message burning in her mind alongside the reality that her son, the child she'd given up to protect, had somehow found his way back to her. Guided by a melody she'd composed from love and heartbreak 32 years ago, she reached for her phone to call Eleanor, then hesitated, the blackmailer's message searing through her thoughts. Phoenix, the villages, the classified operations Jonathan had been involved in that had ultimately destroyed their relationship. Someone knew. Someone was using the past as leverage. And somehow, Marcus had been drawn into their orbit at precisely this moment. Catherine's protective instincts flared. Whatever was happening, she needed to understand the threat before it reached her son. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she'd memorized decades ago, but never used the private line of the man she'd once loved. Then feared, then fled. "Hayes!" His voice answered after a single ring. "Jonathan," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her tone. "We need to talk about Phoenix and about Marcus." The silence that followed was deafening. The coffee shop Jonathan had suggested was small, tucked away on a side street in Cambridge, far from the corporate world where he was instantly recognizable. Catherine arrived early, selecting a table in the back corner with clear sightlines to all exits, a habit she developed during her brief marriage to a military intelligence officer. When Jonathan entered, several heads turned. Even at 65, he commanded attention, tall, distinguished, his bearing unmistakably military beneath the expensive suit. His gaze found her immediately, as if some invisible thread still connected them across time and space. "Catherine," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Jonathan." She studied him openly, cataloging the changes time had wrought. The laugh lines around his eyes had deepened into permanent creases. His once dark hair was now silver at the temples. But his eyes, those piercing blue eyes that Marcus had inherited, remained unchanged. "You're looking well," he offered, the platitude falling flat between them. "Let's not," Catherine replied. "We don't have time for small talk. Someone is threatening to expose Phoenix. They've contacted both of us. And Marcus," her voice caught slightly on their son's name. "He's involved somehow." Jonathan's expression hardened. "What exactly did they say to you?" Catherine pulled out her phone, displaying the text message. Jonathan read it, his jaw tightening. "They broke into my office safe," he said, "stole classified files about Phoenix, used military-grade technology to bypass biometric security. Someone with a grudge," Catherine suggested. "A victim's family member. Perhaps." Jonathan's gaze sharpened. "You still believe that's what Phoenix was creating victims?" "I know what I saw in those villages. Jonathan?" He looked away, the muscle in his jaw working. "That was a lifetime ago. Not for the families of the dead." A tense silence fell between them. Catherine had been in Germany as part of a goodwill tour, singing for troops to boost morale. She'd met Jonathan there, a charismatic young captain with a talent for guitar and a smile that had melted her defenses. Their whirlwind romance had culminated in a small ceremony performed by a chaplain in Saigon. Then Jonathan had been transferred to a classified Operation Phoenix, and everything had changed. Catherine had discovered the true nature of her husband's work during a visit to a remote village where she'd been performing for local children. The raid had come without warning. She'd witnessed things that still haunted her dreams. "Marcus came to the Harmony Project," Catherine said, breaking the silence. "He's taking piano lessons." "With me?" Jonathan's head snapped up. "Why? He doesn't know who I am, if that's what you're asking. He's working on a documentary about the anti-war movement, and," she hesitated, "he plays my lullaby. You're what? The song I composed while I was pregnant. The one I used to sing to him before," she couldn't finish the sentence, "before the custody arrangement, before Jonathan had used his military connections and family money to gain full custody of Marcus, threatening to destroy Catherine's career and reputation if she fought him. Before Catherine had agreed to disappear from her son's life to protect him from the dangerous truth about his father's classified operations." "That's impossible," Jonathan said. He couldn't remember that. Music imprints differently than other memories, especially for infants. He's developed it, transformed it, but the core melody is unmistakable. Catherine leaned forward. "He came to me, Jonathan, after all these years of keeping my distance, of watching him from afar, he found me." Jonathan's expression was unreadable. "What did you tell him about the melody?" "Nothing yet, but he's searching for answers. And now, with these threats." She met his gaze directly. "We need to get ahead of this. Whatever this blackmailer wants, Marcus can't become collateral damage." "Agreed." Jonathan's voice took on the decisive tone of a man accustomed to command. "I have resources, security. We'll protect him." "That's not enough," Catherine countered. "We need to understand what this person wants, what they know. I have someone looking into it, a specialist." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "Another Phoenix operative. Catherine, no. Jonathan, no more shadows, no more secrets." She stood, gathering her coat. "I've sacrificed everything to protect our son, my career, my chance to be his mother, years of his life. I won't let your past put him in danger now." "What are you going to do?" Jonathan asked, tension evident in every line of his body. "What I should have done 30 years ago," Catherine replied. "Find the truth, no matter where it leads." As she turned to leave, Jonathan caught her wrist gently, but with unmistakable urgency. "Kate," he said, using the nickname from their brief marriage, "you don't understand what you're dealing with. These files, Phoenix, it wasn't what you think. It wasn't what I let you believe." Catherine pulled her arm free. "Then what was it? Jonathan, after 33 years, what possible explanation could justify what I saw?" The pain in his eyes almost made her falter. Almost. "Be careful," he said instead of answering. "Whoever this is, they're professional, dangerous." "So am I," Catherine replied. "You made sure of that when you took my son." She left him sitting there, the untouched coffees cooling between them, the gulf of decades and secrets seemingly unbridgeable. Marcus's apartment building had excellent security, a fact he'd never particularly appreciated until he noticed the dark sedan that had been following him since he left the Harmony Project. The car had maintained a discreet distance, but Marcus's anxiety disorder had long ago honed his awareness of potential threats to a razor's edge. He entered through the parking garage, using his key fob to access the private elevator that would take him directly to his floor. As the doors closed, he exhaled slowly, trying to convince himself that the sedan was a coincidence, that his medication was making him paranoid. The elevator opened directly into his apartment's foyer. Marcus stepped out, immediately sensing something wrong. The air felt disturbed, carrying unfamiliar scents cologne, maybe, or gun oil. His cleaning service wasn't scheduled today, and no one else had access to his apartment. Moving silently, Marcus retrieved the baseball bat he kept near the door, a grudging concession to his therapist's insistence that he have some means of self-defense given his public-facing career. He advanced slowly into the living room, phone in his free hand. 911 pre-dialed. The apartment appeared undisturbed at first glance. His piano stood untouched by the window. The stack of composition papers remained neatly arranged on the coffee table. But as his eyes adjusted to the dimness, Marcus noticed the subtle signs of intrusion, the slightly askew cushions on his sofa, the cabinet door not fully closed, the faint scuffs on the hardwood where someone had searched beneath the furniture. A professional job, not a standard burglary. Marcus was about to retreat and call the police when he noticed the envelope on his piano. His name was printed on the front in block letters. Beside it lay a small USB drive. Against all better judgment, Marcus approached, setting down the bat to pick up the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing a typed message. Marcus, your father is not who you think he is. Neither is your mother. Ask about Phoenix. Ask about the villages. Ask why Catherine Reynolds gave you up. Everything you need to know is on the drive. Be careful who you trust. They've been lying to you your entire life. A friend. Marcus stared at the note, confusion and alarm warring within him. Phoenix Villages, Catherine Reynolds. The pianist he'd just met was somehow connected to his parents. His hands shook as he picked up the USB drive. Common sense told him to call the police, to wait for professionals. But the mention of his mother, Victoria, who had abandoned him as a toddler, awakened the desperate need for answers that had haunted him his entire life. He moved to his computer, hesitated, then decided against it. If the drive contained malware, it could compromise his work. Instead, he retrieved an old laptop he kept for travel, disconnected it from the internet, and inserted the USB drive. The folder that appeared contained several documents and a video file. Marcus clicked on the video first. The footage was grainy, clearly from the early 1990s. It showed a courtroom. The camera focused on a young Catherine Reynolds in the witness stand. She looked different younger, her red hair vibrant, her face unmarked by time but unmistakable. Could you state your relationship to the child in question? An off-camera attorney asked. Catherine's voice was steady. I am Marcus's biological mother. Marcus felt the room tilt. He gripped the edge of the desk, trying to process what he'd just heard. And the father, Jonathan Hayes, my ex-husband. The video continued, documenting a custody hearing, Catherine describing her brief marriage to Jonathan during his Germany service, their divorce after she discovered the nature of his classified work, her pregnancy, which she'd hidden from Jonathan until after Marcus's birth, Jonathan's subsequent legal maneuvers to gain custody, using his military connections and family influence. Victoria, the woman Marcus had believed was his mother, appeared in the footage as Jonathan's current wife, agreeing to adopt Marcus as part of the custody arrangement. The final minutes showed Catherine's anguished face as the judge awarded full custody to Jonathan, with a gag order preventing Catherine from contacting Marcus or publicly acknowledging her relationship to him until his 18th birthday. The video ended with Catherine being physically restrained by her attorney as Marcus, just a toddler, was led from the courtroom by a social worker, reaching back toward Catherine with tiny hands. Marcus sat in stunned silence, his entire understanding of his life, his identity, shattered in 20 minutes of courtroom footage. His mother wasn't Victoria Hayes, the cold, distant woman who had left when he was 3. His mother was Catherine Reynolds, the folk singer whose melody had haunted him his entire life. His father had orchestrated the entire deception, and someone wanted Marcus to know the truth now, after 32 years of lies. The ringing of his phone cut through his shock. His father's name flashed on the screen. Marcus stared at it, the familiar anxiety now transformed into something harder, colder. He let it go to voicemail. Then he opened the remaining files on the USB drive, determined to understand exactly what Phoenix was and how it connected to the parents he'd never truly known. Eleanor Washington's brownstone in Roxbury had been her home for over 40 years, a testament to her success as one of the few female jazz pianists to break through in the male-dominated clubs of the 1960s. The walls were adorned with photographs documenting her remarkable life. Eleanor with Duke Ellington, with Dizzy Gillespie, with Martin Luther King Jr., during the March on Washington. Now she sat in her sunroom, watching Catherine pace like a caged tiger. "You need to call him," Eleanor said, referring to Marcus, "and say what Catherine demanded. Hello, I'm your real mother. Sorry about the 32-year absence, but your father threatened to destroy me if I contacted you." "The truth has a way of emerging whether we're ready or not," Eleanor replied calmly. "Better he hear it from you than from some anonymous blackmailer." Catherine sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "I don't even know what this person wants. Money, revenge. To expose Jonathan's war crimes." "Are you certain they were war crimes?" Eleanor asked, her tone neutral. Catherine looked up sharply. "I know what I saw." "You saw the aftermath," Eleanor corrected gently. "You never knew Jonathan's actual role. You made assumptions based on limited information during a chaotic time. You're defending him after everything he did." Eleanor sighed. "I'm suggesting that war creates impossible situations with no clean solutions. I'm suggesting that perhaps Jonathan's actions, and yours, deserve context before judgment." Catherine was about to respond when her phone rang an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Hello, Ms. Reynolds? This is Sophia Chen, Marcus Hayes' girlfriend." The young woman's voice was tense, worried. "I'm sorry to call like this. Marcus gave me your number for emergencies related to his lessons. And I think this qualifies." Catherine's heart rate accelerated. "What's happened? Is Marcus all right?" "I don't know. He called me an hour ago, sounding strange. Said his apartment had been broken into, that he'd discovered something about his parents, about you. He was talking about Phoenix, about Germany. He wasn't making much sense." Sophia paused. "He said he was going to confront his father. Then he hung up. He's not answering my calls now." Catherine closed her eyes, dread washing over her. "Do you know where Jonathan lives?" "Back Bay. I have the address. Marcus took me to dinner there once." "Text it to me." Catherine was already reaching for her coat. "And Sophia, if Marcus contacts you, tell him not to do anything rash. Tell him I can explain everything." After hanging up, Catherine turned to Eleanor. "I have to go. Marcus knows. He's confronting Jonathan." Eleanor nodded, concern evident in her lined face. "Be careful, child. Whatever Jonathan did in Germany, he did it to protect something or someone. Men like that are most dangerous when cornered." "I'll call you when I can." Catherine hugged the older woman fiercely, then hurried out into the gathering dusk, praying she wasn't too late to prevent another family tragedy. Jonathan Hayes' private office at Atlantic Media occupied the entire top floor of their headquarters building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of Boston Harbor, while original artwork and museum-quality artifacts reflected the cultural sophistication expected of a media mogul. Tonight, however, the sophisticated trappings felt like a mockery as Jonathan stared at the surveillance footage from Marcus's apartment building. He watched his son enter, followed 20 minutes later by a nondescript man in maintenance coveralls, the same disguise used during the break-in at Jonathan's office. "We lost him after this," reported Blackwood, the former intelligence operative Jonathan had contacted after the theft. In his 60s now, Blackwood remained dangerous, a compact man with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that revealed nothing. He disabled the cameras on Marcus's floor. By the time they came back online, he was gone, and the sedan following Marcus. Registered to a shell company. Professional job. Blackwood's assessment was clinical. "They're sending a message. They could have taken Marcus if that was the objective." Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. "Identification. Working on it. The facial recognition is running against agency databases. So far, nothing." Blackwood studied his former commanding officer. "This is about Phoenix." It wasn't a question. "Yes. Then it's about the villages. About Operation Falling Phoenix." Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but something hardened in his eyes. "We agreed never to speak of it again." "Someone else is speaking now," Jonathan replied. "They've contacted Catherine, and they've apparently left something for Marcus." Blackwood swore softly. "The son? Does he know about Catherine?" "I don't think so. Not yet." "No. Hayes. About you. About what you really did in Germany." Jonathan turned away, his reflection in the darkened window overlaying the city lights like a ghost. "No one knows that, except you. And the dead," Blackwood added quietly. The office door burst open before Jonathan could respond. Both men turned, Blackwood's hand moving instinctively toward the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes Catherine's intensity and Jonathan's blue, blazing with hurt and anger. "Marcus," Jonathan began, signaling Blackwood to stand down. "I've been trying to reach you." "I know who Catherine Reynolds is," Marcus said, his voice unnervingly steady. "I know who my mother is." Jonathan felt the blood drain from his face. "Marcus, whatever you think you know, I've seen the court records, the custody hearing." Marcus stepped into the office, noticing Blackwood for the first time. "Who's this, another Phoenix operative?" Blackwood's expression betrayed nothing, but Jonathan could sense his alertness, his assessment of Marcus as a potential threat. "This is a private conversation," Jonathan told Blackwood. "Give us the room." After a moment's hesitation, Blackwood nodded and moved toward the door. As he passed Marcus, he paused. "Your father is a better man than you currently believe," he said quietly. "Hear him out." When they were alone, Marcus advanced until he stood directly across the desk from Jonathan. 32 years, he said, his voice breaking slightly. "My entire life, you let me believe Victoria was my mother, that she abandoned me, that Catherine Reynolds was a stranger." "Marcus, was any of it real? Any of it?" Marcus's control slipped, raw pain bleeding through. "The anxiety disorder I've struggled with my entire life is that because I was torn away from my real mother as a toddler, the melody that haunts me, that's her lullaby? Isn't it, the one she used to sing to me before you took me away from her?" Jonathan sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. "Yes," he admitted. "The melody is Catherine's. She composed it while she was pregnant with you." "Why?" Marcus demanded, his voice rising. "Why would you separate us? What kind of monster?" "I was protecting you," Jonathan shouted, his careful control finally cracking. "Both of you. You have no idea what was at stake. Then tell me, what was Phoenix? What happened in those villages that was so terrible Catherine left you? What secrets are worth destroying a family over?" Jonathan stared at his son, this brilliant, sensitive young man who had always seemed more Catherine's child than his. The weight of 32 years of necessary lies pressed down on him like a physical burden. "Phoenix was a counterintelligence operation," he began, his voice low. "Officially, it targeted Viet Cong infrastructure, identifying and neutralizing their operatives embedded in civilian populations." "Assassination," Marcus translated flatly. That was part of it, Jonathan acknowledged. But Phoenix was more complex than history has recorded. There were factions within the program. Some followed orders without question. Others had different objectives. And which were you? Jonathan met his son's accusing stare. I was undercover, Marcus, not for the CIA or military intelligence, for a specialized congressional oversight committee investigating Phoenix for potential war crimes. Marcus froze, clearly blindsided by this revelation. What? My official record shows I was Army intelligence attached to Phoenix? That's true. What isn't in any public record is that I was feeding information to a secret congressional panel trying to gather evidence of illegal operations. Jonathan's gaze turned inward, seeing ghosts from decades past. It was dangerous, thankless work. If my cover had been blown, I would have been killed not by the enemy, but by our own people. Catherine knew about this. Jonathan shook his head. No, I couldn't tell her. The fewer people who knew, the safer everyone was. When she came to Germany as part of that USO tour, I should have kept my distance. But, he trailed off, remembering. She was like no one I'd ever met. Passionate, fearless, brilliant. We fell in love. Got married quickly, too quickly. Then what happened? Marcus asked, his anger tempered now by confusion. She accompanied me to a village, part of her outreach program for local children. There was a raid that night, Phoenix operatives acting on false intelligence I deliberately provided to expose a corrupt faction within the program. It went wrong. Civilians died. Jonathan's voice grew hoarse. Catherine saw the aftermath, assumed I was responsible, when I couldn't defend myself without revealing my true role. She left, filed for divorce as soon as she returned to the States. She didn't know she was pregnant. Not then. She found out later. By that time, I was deep undercover again. She tried to contact me once, through my parents. Jonathan's expression hardened. They weren't kind to her, told her I wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. By the time I returned stateside and discovered their deception, Catherine had already given birth and was raising you alone. Marcus sat heavily in the chair across from Jonathan. So you sued for custody, used your connections to take me away from her. It's not that simple, Jonathan insisted. Phoenix had been officially terminated, but those corrupt elements I'd been investigating, they went underground. They knew who I was, what I'd done. There were threats against me, against anyone connected to me, including Catherine and me, Marcus concluded, understanding dawning in his eyes. Yes, I had resources, security, connections to protect you. Catherine was vulnerable, a single mother, a public figure with an anti-war history. The custody battle was... Jonathan hesitated, shame evident in his expression. It was ugly. I used every advantage, not because I wanted to hurt Catherine, but because I needed you where I could protect you. And Victoria, where does she fit into all this? Victoria and I were already married when I discovered Catherine had given birth to you. It was a convenient arrangement. She wanted the social status of being my wife. I needed the family connections her name provided to continue my work. When I gained custody of you, she agreed to be listed as your mother to further obscure the connection to Catherine. Jonathan's mouth twisted. She was never maternal. When we divorced, she was happy to surrender any claim to you. Marcus absorbed this in silence, his composer's mind fitting the complex pieces together. And now why is someone threatening to expose all this now? I don't know, but they stole classified files about Phoenix. They broke into your apartment. Jonathan leaned forward. Marcus, whatever you found a video, documents it's part of someone's agenda. They're using the past as a weapon. Against who you, Catherine, or me? Before Jonathan could respond, his private line rang, the secure phone only a handful of people had access to. He answered cautiously. Hayes. Captain, came the same electronically disguised voice from before. I see the family reunion is proceeding ahead of schedule. Touching. Jonathan's blood ran cold. He pressed the speakerphone button, signaling Marcus to remain silent. How do you know that? I know everything, Captain, including what really happened at Thanahoa, including why you really took the boy from his mother? The voice paused. Including what's in the file you keep in your private safe at home, the one even Blackwood doesn't know about. Jonathan's face drained of color. What do you want? Justice? Exposure? The truth about Phoenix that never made it into the congressional record. Another pause. Check your email. Captain, you have 1 hour to meet my demands, or the world learns what kind of man built the Atlantic media empire. What kind of legacy you're leaving your son. The call disconnected. Marcus stared at his father. New questions forming. Thunhoa, what happened there? What file is he talking about? Marcus, Jonathan began, but was interrupted by the chime of his email. He opened the message to find a single video attachment. His hand shook slightly as he clicked play. The footage was grainy, black and white, clearly from a surveillance camera. It showed a younger Jonathan in military fatigues entering a village hut. Seconds later, gunfire erupted. When Jonathan emerged, his uniform was splattered with blood, a pistol in his hand. That's not what it looks like, Jonathan said, his voice hollow. That's not. The office door flew open again. Catherine Reynolds stood in the doorway, breathless, her eyes immediately finding Marcus. Don't believe everything you see, she said, moving toward them. Especially about Germany, especially about your father. Marcus looked between his biological parents, these strangers who had created him, separated from him, and apparently lied to him in different ways his entire life. I don't know what to believe anymore, he said finally. Either of you. Catherine approached cautiously, as if Marcus were a wounded animal that might bolt. I know you're angry. You have every right to be, but right now, someone is using our past to manipulate all of us. We need to understand why before we can address the hurt between us. She's right, Jonathan agreed, closing the video. Someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to bring us together in this way. At this time, the question is, who benefits from exposing Phoenix after all these years? Marcus's analytical mind engaged despite his emotional turmoil. The email, can you trace it? Jonathan shook his head. Routed through multiple proxies, professional job. The blackmailer mentioned Thanhoa, Catherine said, her expression troubled. That's the village where I saw the aftermath of the raid, where everything fell apart between us. Yes, Jonathan confirmed. And it's connected to why I took Marcus, why I kept you apart all these years. He checked his watch. We have less than an hour before this escalates. Whatever this person wants, they're serious. They've been planning this for years. Then we need to understand exactly what happened at Thanhoa, Marcus said decisively. No more half-truths. No more protecting me from the past. He looked between his biological parents. I deserve to know who I am, where I come from. All of it. Jonathan and Catherine exchanged a long look, former lovers, adversaries, co-parents united by a son who had somehow found his way back to both of them, guided by a melody that had bridged 32 years of silence. All of it, Jonathan agreed finally. But not here. We're compromised. Blackwood has a safe house in South Boston. No electronic surveillance, no connections to me or Atlantic media. I'll drive, Catherine said, already moving toward the door. My car's less likely to be recognized than yours. As they prepared to leave, Marcus stopped, struck by the surreal nature of the situation. Just 24 hours ago, he'd been a successful composer with a clear understanding of his life and heritage. Now, he was fleeing to a safe house with the biological parents he'd never known, pursued by a blackmailer with a vendetta rooted in a war that had ended before he was born. The melody, he said suddenly. My melody, your lullaby. There's something important about it. Isn't there something beyond just a mother's song to her child? Catherine and Jonathan exchanged another look, something unspoken passing between them. Yes, Catherine admitted, but that's part of what we need to explain at the safe house. It's connected to everything Phoenix, Tanhoa, why we separated, why someone wants the truth exposed now. Jonathan moved to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a hidden safe. He entered a complex combination, removed a sealed envelope, and tucked it into his jacket. Let's go, he said. I'll explain everything once we're secure. As they moved toward the private elevator, Marcus felt a strange sense of destiny, as if the melody that had haunted him his entire life had been leading him to this moment. This confrontation with the truth about his origins and the parents who had both loved and failed him in complex, human ways. For the first time in his life, he was about to discover who Marcus Hayes truly was, beyond the convenient fictions and necessary lies that had shaped his existence. And somewhere in Boston, a nameless enemy watched through electronic eyes, waiting for the final movement of a symphony of revenge 32 years in the making. The safe house in South Boston occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse, the kind of industrial chic space that now commanded premium prices from young professionals. Its windows overlooked the harbor, lights from passing boats casting shifting patterns across the exposed brick walls. Blackwood had arrived ahead of them, the space already secured when Catherine pulled her nondescript Volvo into the underground garage. She killed the engine, her hands lingering on the steering wheel as if reluctant to proceed to the next chapter of this unfolding drama. You okay? Marcus asked from the back seat, surprising himself with the concern he felt for this woman, his biological mother, despite the anger still simmering beneath the surface. Just processing, Catherine replied, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. 24 hours ago, I was preparing for a concert. Now I'm in a safe house with my son and ex-husband, hiding from someone threatening to expose classified operations from the Germany war. Welcome to the Hayes family dynamic, Marcus said dryly. Apparently we specialize in complicated. A ghost of a smile touched Catherine's lips, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from her. The resemblance between them became suddenly striking. Jonathan, seated beside Catherine, had remained silent during the drive, his attention divided between checking for surveillance and studying the sealed envelope he'd retrieved from his office safe. Now he tucked it inside his jacket and reached for the door handle. Blackwood will have swept for surveillance, but we should still minimize electronic exposure, he said. All business again. Phones off and batteries removed. They followed his instructions, surrendering their disassembled devices to Jonathan, who secured them in a signal-blocking case. The elevator ride to the top floor passed in tense silence, each lost in private thoughts. Blackwood met them at the entrance, efficient, watchful, a gun visible beneath his open jacket. Clear so far, he reported to Jonathan. Perimeter secure. Communication scrambled. The space within was surprisingly comfortable, less tactical bunker, more upscale apartment, though Marcus noted the reinforced door, the strategic placement of furniture that provided cover from windows, the multiple exit routes. Make yourselves comfortable, Blackwood said, gesturing toward the main living area. I'll maintain the perimeter. He disappeared into what appeared to be a security monitoring room, closing the door behind him. Alone now, the three of them stood awkwardly in the center of the room, decades of secrets and separation stretching between them like tripwires. Well, Marcus said finally, breaking the silence. I believe you promised me answers about Phoenix, about Than Hoa, about why my entire life has been built on lies. Jonathan moved to the kitchen area, retrieving 3 glasses and a bottle of scotch. Might need this, he said, pouring generous measures. It's a long story, and none of it is simple. Catherine declined the offered glass, settling instead on one of the leather sofas. Start at the beginning. Jonathan, no more redactions. Jonathan took a fortifying sip before joining her, leaving a careful distance between them. Marcus remained standing, unwilling to relax just yet. I was recruited into military intelligence directly out of Yale in 1965, Jonathan began. My family had connections, 3 generations of military service. Political ties, I was idealistic, believed in the mission. Germany seemed clear-cut, then stop communist expansion, protect democracy. He stared into his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. By 68, I was having doubts. The war wasn't what we'd been told. I voiced concerns to my commanding officer about civilian casualties, about tactics that seemed counterproductive. Instead of facing disciplinary action, I was approached by a Senator Harrington, head of a classified congressional committee investigating potential war crimes. They recruited you as a mole, Marcus concluded. Jonathan nodded. Officially, I remained Army intelligence. Unofficially, I was gathering evidence on Phoenix operations that violated international law or congressional authorizations. It was dangerous work if exposed. I'd have been labeled a traitor, faced court-martial, possibly worse. Then you met me, Catherine said, her voice soft with memory. USO Tour, Saigon, April 1969. Jonathan confirmed, something in his expression softening. You were performing for the troops. I was there as part of my cover, the intelligence officer who played guitar in his spare time. We were married 6 weeks later, Catherine added for Marcus's benefit. A chaplain in Saigon, 2 witnesses from Jonathan's unit. It was impulsive, romantic, completely irrational given the circumstances. And then, Marcus prompted, struggling to reconcile this story of wartime romance with the bitter custody battle he discovered. Then I was transferred to direct Phoenix operations in Thanh Hoa province, Jonathan continued. Catherine remained in Saigon, performing, while he hesitated. Marcus pressed, while I orchestrated an operation designed to expose a corrupt Phoenix faction led by a Colonel Westmoreland, no relation to the general. This group was using Phoenix as cover for weapons trafficking, opium smuggling, selling intelligence to private interests. They were eliminating witnesses, including civilians, and blaming the casualties on Viet Cong. Jonathan set his glass down, his hands no longer entirely steady. I fed them false intelligence about Viet Cong operatives supposedly hiding in a particular village. The plan was for Senator Harrington's committee to have observers in place to document the illegal operation, exposing Westmoreland's faction. But something went wrong, Marcus guessed, watching his father's face. Catastrophically wrong. Someone leaked our plan to Westmoreland. His team swept the village the night before our observers arrived. They eliminated everyone, men, women, children, and staged it to look like Viet Cong activity. Jonathan's voice had grown hoarse. When I arrived the next morning with the congressional observers, we found a massacre. Catherine had gone pale, her hands clenched in her lap. I wasn't supposed to be there, she whispered. I'd arranged to visit that village as part of a children's music program. When I arrived and saw what had happened, saw Jonathan there with his unit. She shook her head. I thought he was responsible. He couldn't explain without exposing his cover. I tried to tell you it wasn't what it seemed, Jonathan said, looking directly at Catherine now. But I couldn't tell you the truth, not then, not there. It would have endangered both of us. So I left, Catherine concluded. Filed for divorce as soon as I returned to the States. Discovered I was pregnant a month later. Marcus paced the room, absorbing this information. That still doesn't explain the custody battle. Why you kept me apart for 32 years. Jonathan and Catherine exchanged a look laden with decades of complicated history. After Thanh Hoa, I continued gathering evidence, Jonathan explained. By early 1970, we had enough to shut down Westmoreland's operation. The official story was that he and his key officers died in a helicopter crash. The truth was more deliberate. You eliminated them, Marcus translated flatly. The committee did, Jonathan corrected. I provided the intelligence that made it possible. Afterward, I was extracted, debriefed, and discharged with honors. My official record shows a distinguished career in military intelligence. The classified addendum tells a different story. But it was over, Marcus pointed out. Why not reconnect with Catherine then? Why the custody battle years later? Jonathan's expression darkened. Because it wasn't over. Westmoreland had powerful connections, private military contractors, politicians, intelligence operatives who had profited from his side operations. They knew someone had betrayed them. They didn't know who, but they were looking. I returned to the States in 1971, Jonathan continued. My family had arranged a suitable position at a media company, a suitable marriage to Victoria, Hamilton old money, political connections. I had no idea Catherine had given birth to you. My parents. He hesitated, shame evident in his expression. My parents intercepted Catherine's attempts to contact me, told her I wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. When did you find out about me? Marcus asked, struggling to keep his voice neutral. 1989. Victoria and I were already having problems. During an argument, she mentioned rumors about a musician from my past who'd had my child. I investigated immediately. And instead of contacting me, explaining, you launched a legal battle to take Marcus away, Catherine said, old hurt evident in her voice. Because I discovered Westmoreland's network was still active, still looking for the person who had betrayed them, Jonathan replied urgently. They had identified Catherine as someone connected to me during that critical period. They were watching her, which meant they were watching you. Marcus, he stood, moving to the window to check the harbor before continuing. I had resources, security, connections. Catherine was vulnerable, a public figure with an anti-war history, raising a child alone. The custody battle was the most expedient way to bring you under my protection. You could have explained this to me, Catherine argued, anger flaring. We could have worked together to protect him and paint an even larger target on both of you. Jonathan turned back to face them. The only way to ensure your safety was to sever all public connections between us, to make it appear our relationship had ended badly, with no ongoing contact. Marcus watched this exchange with growing understanding. So the whole custody battle, the gag order preventing Catherine from contacting me, it was all for protection. Yes, Jonathan affirmed. Not that it makes it right, or erases the pain it caused both of you, but yes, it was the only way I could see to keep you safe. And Victoria, Marcus asked, where does she fit in all this? Victoria knew about my military background, but not the classified details. She agreed to be listed as your mother on public documents as part of our divorce settlement. She had no interest in actual motherhood, but the social status of our marriage mattered to her family. The narrative that she left you with me after the divorce was convenient for everyone's public image. Marcus absorbed this. 32 years of assumptions and half-truths collapsing like a house of cards. And now, why is someone threatening to expose all this now? Jonathan returned to the sofa, retrieving the sealed envelope from his jacket. Because of this, he said, breaking the seal and removing several photographs and a data drive. The final piece of the Phoenix operation that never made it into any report, classified or otherwise. The photographs showed a younger Jonathan with another soldier similar in appearance, both in military fatigues, arms around each other's shoulders, standing before a helicopter. This is Robert Hayes, Jonathan said, his voice softening. My younger brother. He was Army intelligence too, assigned to a different sector. What no one knew, what wasn't in any official record, was that Robert was also working for Senator Harrington's committee. He was my handler, my primary contact. You have a brother, Marcus asked, stunned by this revelation. Why have I never heard of him? Because officially, Robert Hayes died in a field hospital in 1970 after a Viet Cong ambush. Jonathan placed the photo on the coffee table. Unofficially, he was murdered by Westmoreland's people. They discovered his connection to the committee, but not his connection to me. Catherine had gone very still. The melody, she said softly. Robert's melody. Jonathan nodded. Robert was the musician in the family, not me. That song you always play. Marcus, the one that's haunted you. It wasn't just Catherine's lullaby for you. The core progression, the foundation of it, was something Robert composed in Germany. Marcus sank onto the sofa across from them, struggling to process this new revelation. I don't understand. Catherine moved to sit beside him, close but not touching. When Jonathan and I were together in Germany, his brother Robert taught me that melody, said it was something he'd been working on, a piece about finding light in darkness. After I discovered I was pregnant, after I believed Jonathan was involved in war crimes, that melody became the foundation for the lullaby I sang to you. What you didn't know, Jonathan added, what no one knew except Robert and me, was that the melody wasn't just music, it was a code. A code for what Marcus asked. Coordinates, names, dates, evidence we'd gathered on Westmoreland's operation, hidden in plain sight as a musical composition in case our conventional communications were compromised. Jonathan retrieved the data drive. Robert hid the complete melody and its key in multiple pieces, distributing them through different channels. I had part. Catherine unwittingly had part, and the final piece was hidden in a safety deposit box that could only be accessed with specific recognition phrases. That's what the blackmailer wants, Marcus realized. The complete melody, the complete code. Yes, because it doesn't just implicate Westmoreland's dead operation, it implicates people still alive, still powerful politicians, military contractors, intelligence officials who participated in or profited from illegal Phoenix operations. Including Senator Harrington, Catherine said, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's the final twist, isn't it? Harrington wasn't investigating Phoenix out of moral outrage. He was eliminating rivals for those same illegal operations. Jonathan nodded grimly. By the time I discovered Harrington's true motives, Robert was dead, and I was being celebrated as a hero by the very people I'd been trying to expose. My only option was to gather evidence quietly, protect what Robert had died to secure, and wait for an opportunity to expose the entire network. Which never came, Marcus concluded. The timing was never right. The political climate, the potential collateral damage, the risk to you and Catherine. There was always a reason to wait. Jonathan's expression revealed the weight of decades of silence. Eventually, the waiting became a habit. The secret became a burden I carried alone. Not anymore, said a new voice from the doorway. All three turned to see Blackwood standing there, gun drawn, his expression coldly professional. Blackwood? Jonathan stood slowly, positioning himself between the weapon and his family. What is this? Insurance, Blackwood replied calmly. Senator Harrington sends his regards. Catherine gasped. Harrington is still alive. Very much so. Retired officially, but still influential. Blackwood gestured with his weapon. The data drive. Captain Hayes. It's time to complete what started in Than Hoa. You've been working for him all along, Jonathan realized, his voice hardening. 30 years as my security consultant, and you've been reporting to Harrington. Not initially, Blackwood admitted, but eventually, yes, the senator can be very persuasive and very generous to those who serve his interests. You sent the messages, Marcus said, studying the man with new understanding. Broke into my apartment, my father's office. You're the blackmailer. Blackwood inclined his head slightly. A necessary performance to bring all the players together. The senator is dying, Captain. Pancreatic cancer. Very advanced. He wants to tie up loose ends before he goes, including the Hayes brothers and their inconvenient evidence. And Catherine Marcus. They weren't involved in any of this, Jonathan argued. Collateral damage. I'm afraid, just like in war, Blackwood's expression remained impassive. Ms. Reynolds unwittingly carried part of Robert's code in that lullaby she composed. And your son, well, his recent documentary work on the anti-war movement has been attracting attention in inconvenient places. Questions about Phoenix are resurfacing. The senator prefers a clean slate. As Blackwood spoke, Marcus noticed Catherine's hand sliding slowly toward a decorative paperweight on the side table. He kept his expression neutral, not wanting to alert Blackwood to her movement. The data drive, Blackwood repeated, extending his free hand. Then we'll discuss the next steps. Jonathan hesitated, then slowly reached for the drive. You won't get away with this. Blackwood, there are safeguards. I'm counting on it, Blackwood replied. That's why I need your cooperation rather than simply eliminating you all now. Biometric locks, recognition phrases. The Senator's technical team has been quite impressed with your precautions, but ultimately futile. As Jonathan held out the drive, Catherine suddenly launched the heavy paperweight at Blackwood's head. He ducked instinctively, his attention diverted just long enough for Jonathan to lunge forward, grappling for the gun. Run! Jonathan shouted as he and Blackwood crashed into a bookshelf, sending volumes cascading to the floor. Marcus grabbed Catherine's arm, pulling her toward the kitchen and the building's service stairs beyond. Behind them, a shot rang out, then another, followed by the sounds of struggle. We can't leave him, Catherine protested, resisting Marcus's pull. We can't help him if we're dead, Marcus countered, his voice urgent. We need to get help. They burst through the service door onto a metal staircase that descended through the core of the building. Catherine paused, listening for pursuit, then led the way downward, her movements surprisingly agile for a woman in her 50s. Blackwood will have disabled the security systems, cut communications, she said between breaths as they descended. We need to reach someone Jonathan trusts, if such a person exists. David Chen, Marcus supplied immediately. His executive assistant. He's been with my father for 20 years. If anyone's loyal, it's him. Can you contact him without phones? His apartment is in Cambridge, near mine. If we can get there. A door slammed open above them, followed by footsteps on the metal stairs. Catherine, Jonathan's voice echoed down the stairwell. Marcus, he's right behind me. Moments later, Jonathan came into view, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, the data drive clutched in his hand. Go! He shouted. Meet at the fallback position. Catherine hesitated. You never told me a fallback position. Marcus knows, Jonathan called, pausing to look back up the stairwell. Eleanor's place. Go now. The sound of a door bursting open above spurred them into motion again. They continued downward, the metallic clanging of their footsteps echoing off concrete walls, until they reached the ground floor. The service exit opened onto a back alley, dark and narrow, lined with dumpsters and fire escapes. A light rain had begun to fall, slicking the pavement and reducing visibility, a blessing and a curse. My car's in the garage, Catherine said, orienting herself. But Blackwood will expect that. This way, Marcus decided, leading them deeper into the maze of alleys that characterize this part of South Boston. There's a subway station 3 blocks north. We can use that to reach Cambridge. They moved quickly, keeping to shadows, their pace just short of running. Behind them, they heard another door slam, followed by a shout that was whipped away by the strengthening wind. Your father! Catherine gasped as they ran. He's buying us time. He'll be okay, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. He's survived worse. The rain intensified, plastering their clothes to their bodies, washing away the blood from Jonathan's earlier wound that had stained Catherine's sleeve. They turned a corner and found themselves facing a main street, traffic moving steadily despite the late hour and worsening weather. The station's there. Marcus pointed to a subway entrance across the street and half a block down. If we can make it, the sound of squealing tires cut him off. A black SUV with tinted windows swerved around the corner, accelerating in their direction. Run! Catherine shouted, pulling Marcus toward the subway entrance. They sprinted across the street, dodging honking cars, the SUV closing the distance with alarming speed. As they reached the sidewalk, the vehicle mounted the curb behind them, sending pedestrians scattering in panic. Marcus felt Catherine's hand on his back, pushing him forward with surprising strength as they reached the subway stairs. They half ran, half fell down the steps, the sounds of chaos erupting behind them. The station was sparsely populated at this hour, a few late-night workers, some students, a homeless man sleeping on a bench. Marcus glanced back up the stairs but saw no immediate pursuit. Tokens, Catherine gasped, pulling a handful of crumpled bills from her pocket. Do they still use tokens? Charlie cards now, Marcus corrected, guiding her to a ticket machine. Here, I have one. He swiped his transit card, ushering Catherine through the turnstile before following. They hurried toward the platform just as a train arrived, its doors sliding open with a mechanical hiss. They boarded quickly, positioning themselves in a corner seat with good visibility of the entire car. As the doors began to close, a hand thrust between them, forcing them back open. Marcus tensed, ready for Blackwood. But instead, a disheveled Jonathan Hayes stumbled into the car, collapsing onto the seat opposite them. His suit was torn, his face bloodied, but his eyes were clear and focused. That was unpleasantly close, he managed, attempting to straighten his tie as the train lurched into motion. Blackwood, Catherine asked. Temporarily delayed by Boston's finest, someone reported an armed man chasing people into the subway. The police response was enthusiastic. Jonathan winced as he shifted position. It won't hold him for long, but it gives us breathing room. Marcus studied his father with new eyes, not the corporate titan or distant parent he'd known all his life, but a man who had survived war, betrayal, and now an attempt on his life, yet still maintained his composure. The drive, Marcus asked. Jonathan patted his jacket pocket. Secure, but it's only part of what we need. Eleanor's place, Catherine said. You mentioned a fallback position. Eleanor Washington, Jonathan confirmed. Your mentor, your friend, and Robert's fiancée. Catherine's eyes widened. What Eleanor never mentioned, she wouldn't have. Their relationship was classified, like everything else connected to Phoenix. She was performing for troops in Saigon when she met Robert. When he was killed, she returned to the States, built her career, never spoke of him again. Jonathan's expression softened. Except to you, Catherine. She found you because of your connection to me, to Robert. That's why she took me in when I was pregnant. Catherine realized why she helped me after the custody battle. She knew. She's been the guardian of Robert's legacy all these years, Jonathan confirmed, and the keeper of the final piece of his code. The train slowed, approaching a station. Jonathan tensed, scanning the platform as the doors opened. Not our stop, Marcus said quietly. 2 more. They fell silent as new passengers boarded, averting their faces from the curious glances drawn by Jonathan's disheveled appearance. When the train resumed its journey, Catherine leaned forward. How did you know Eleanor had part of the code? She asked. I didn't, not initially, but after Tanihoa, after Robert's death, I received a message arranged by him before he died. It contained a musical notation and instructions to find the jazz pianist with the monarch's name. Jonathan's mouth quirked slightly. Eleanor Washington. Ella, Queen of Jazz. And the melody I've been hearing my whole life, Marcus pressed. The one you said was both Catherine's lullaby and Robert's code. Robert composed the core progression as a mnemonic device for the information we were gathering. When Catherine left me, when she discovered she was pregnant, she built upon that foundation to create your lullaby. Jonathan's gaze moved between them. 2 pieces of the same puzzle, separated for decades, now finally coming together. The train slowed again, approaching another station. Through the windows, they could see the platform was nearly empty. Next stop, Marcus said. Rising, they exited the train cautiously, Jonathan leading the way, scanning for threats as they ascended to street level. The rain had intensified, sheets of water cascading from building eaves, transforming the streets into mirror-like surfaces that reflected the city lights. Eleanor's is about 10 blocks from here, Catherine said, orienting herself. We should know. Wait, Jonathan interrupted, his attention fixed on a black SUV idling at a nearby intersection. That's Blackwood's vehicle. How did he find us so quickly? Marcus asked, pulling back into the shelter of the station entrance. He knows where we're going, Jonathan realized. He's anticipated our moves. Then we need to change the game, Catherine said decisively. Somewhere he wouldn't expect. Somewhere connected to Robert, but not obviously. Jonathan considered this, then nodded. The old jazz club in Roxbury, the Blue Ceiling. It closed years ago, Catherine objected. The building's still there. Robert and Eleanor used to meet there. Jonathan checked the street again. It's a risk, but less of one than walking into a trap at Eleanor's. I know that area, Marcus said. We can take the Orange Line, then walk a few blocks. As they formulated their plan, none of them noticed the traffic camera above the intersection pivoting slightly to track their movement, its feed transmitting to a secure location where Blackwood watched. His expression unchanged as he listened to their conversation through the directional microphone mounted beside the camera. Predictable, he murmured, reaching for his phone. All pieces moving exactly as planned. The Blue Ceiling Jazz Club had once been the heartbeat of Boston's jazz scene in the 1960s, a place where musicians like Eleanor Washington had performed alongside legends, where racial barriers had temporarily dissolved in the universal language of music. Now, its faded facade bore witness to changing times, the building repurposed as a storage facility, its glorious history preserved only in photographs and memories. Jonathan led them through a side alley to a rusted door nearly hidden behind overflowing dumpsters. The lock yielded to a combination that hadn't changed in decades, speaking to the owner's sentimentality or negligence. Inside, the air was thick with dust and forgotten glory. Shrouded shapes, tables, and chairs stacked against walls created a ghostly audience in the darkness. The stage remained, though its once glossy surface was now dull with neglect. There should be a generator, Jonathan said, moving confidently through the darkness. Emergency lighting at least. How do you know this place so well? Marcus asked, following closely. I came here often, after everything, Jonathan admitted, locating a breaker panel behind the old bar. Sat in the darkness, listened to the echoes. It was the closest I could get to Robert, to the life I might have had. He flipped several switches, and dim security lights flickered to life, casting long shadows across the abandoned club. In the weak illumination, Catherine moved toward the stage, her hand trailing over the dusty piano that remained, a silent sentinel to bygone eras. Eleanor performed here the night she met Robert, she said softly. She told me once it was the best set of her life, though she didn't know why until later. Jonathan joined them, the data drive in his hand. Robert said there was a safe room beneath the stage, a prohibition holdover, later used to hide civil rights activists when police raided the club. Together, they examined the stage, finding a nearly invisible seam in the floorboards. Jonathan pressed a specific sequence of panels, and a section of flooring swung upward, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Wait here, Jonathan said, retrieving a small flashlight from his pocket. Let me check first. No, Catherine countered firmly. We stay together. No more separation. Jonathan hesitated, then nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in her words. The three of them descended the stairs carefully, emerging into a small room that might once have held 20 people in cramped conditions. The space had been converted into a kind of memorial. Photographs lined the walls, Robert Hayes in uniform, with Eleanor, with Jonathan, news clippings about Phoenix operations, carefully preserved, maps of Germany with locations marked in red, and in the center, a vintage record player with a single vinyl album beside it. Eleanor maintained this, Catherine realized, recognizing her mentor's touch in the careful arrangement. All these years, a shrine to what was lost, Jonathan agreed, moving to the record player, and a repository for what was saved. He removed the vinyl from its sleeve, a recording by Eleanor Washington from 1969, Blues for Saigon. Setting it on the turntable, he carefully placed the needle. Static crackled through hidden speakers. Then Eleanor's piano filled the room, haunting, complex, achingly beautiful. As the music played, Jonathan retrieved the data drive, connecting it to a laptop that sat closed on a small desk in the corner. The computer was old but functional, whirring to life as he entered a series of passwords. "What we're looking for," he explained as he worked, "is a complete cipher key. Robert's melody contains encoded information about Phoenix operations names, dates, locations, account numbers, but without the key, it's just music." "And the key is here?" Marcus asked, examining the photographs with newfound interest. "Part of it. The rest is in Eleanor's possession, or was, until Blackwood's interference." Jonathan's fingers moved rapidly over the keyboard. "What we have here, combined with what's on this drive, should be enough to access the main repository." "Which is where?" Catherine asked. "A secure server Robert established before his death, maintained by a trust he created. The server updates itself, adapts its security protocols. It was decades ahead of its time when he designed it." Pride colored Jonathan's voice. "My brother was brilliant that way." As Eleanor's music reached its crescendo, a message appeared on the computer screen. "Authentication required." Musical passphrase. Jonathan turned to Marcus. "This is where you come in. The melody you've carried all these years, play it. The computer has a microphone. It's listening." Marcus hesitated, looking around. "There's no piano." "Anna, use your voice," Catherine suggested. "Hum it, the way I used to sing it to you." Marcus closed his eyes, summoning the melody that had haunted him since childhood. He began to hum softly, the notes rising and falling in the dusty air of the hidden room. Catherine joined him, her voice blending with his in perfect harmony, adding depth to the simple progression. As their voices twined together, Jonathan's deeper tones completed the chord structure. 3 generations of the Hayes family united in music for the first time. On the computer screen, a visualization of the sound appeared, analyzing the pattern. Then authentication accepted. "Welcome, Robert." "It worked," Jonathan breathed, as files began populating the screen. "It's all here, everything Robert and I gathered on Phoenix, on Westmoreland's operation, on Harrington's involvement." Catherine moved closer, studying the data. "Names I recognize, senators still in office, military contractors still receiving government funds. The complete network," Jonathan confirmed, "and evidence of their crimes, preserved for 30 years. "Why keep it hidden so long?" Marcus asked, the question that had been building since this began. "Why not expose them years ago?" Jonathan's expression darkened. "Because the reach of this network extended to the highest levels of government. Because any attempt to expose them would have been buried along with anyone involved in the exposure." He gestured to the files. "This was my insurance policy. As long as this existed, as long as I maintained my position and influence, you and Catherine were safe." "And now," Catherine pressed, "why is Harrington moving against us now, after all this time?" "He's dying," Jonathan reminded them. "He wants to tie up loose ends, eliminate any possibility of his legacy being tarnished. And Marcus's documentary work has been stirring interest in Phoenix again, bringing unwanted attention." Marcus absorbed this, understanding dawning. "My film project, it's been putting us all at risk without my knowing it." "You couldn't have known," Catherine assured him, her hand finding his shoulder in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "None of this is your fault." "No," came a new voice from the stairway. "It's his." They turned to see Blackwood descending into the hidden room, gun trained steadily on Jonathan. Behind him followed a frail but commanding figure, an elderly man in an expensive suit, his gaunt face betraying the ravages of terminal illness despite his immaculate appearance. "Senator Harrington," Jonathan acknowledged, stepping protectively in front of Catherine and Marcus. "You're looking terminal." The old man's laugh was a dry rattle. "Always the wit. Hayes, even at the end." He moved carefully into the room, surveying the collection of evidence with distaste. "Your brother's little insurance policy. How touching." How did you find us?" Catherine demanded. "Please, Miss Reynolds. You think this little shrine has gone unmonitored all these years?" Harrington gestured dismissively. "I've known about it since the 90s. Just as I've known about Eleanor Washington's connection to Robert Hayes, just as I've known about your son and his convenient musical obsession, then why wait until now? Marcus asked, studying the man who had orchestrated so much suffering from the shadows. Timing. Young man. Politics is all about timing. Harrington settled himself carefully onto a dusty chair, his movements betraying his physical weakness. As long as Jonathan played his part building his media empire, maintaining certain narratives, protecting certain interests, there was no need for drastic measures. You used me, Jonathan realized. Atlantic Media's coverage, our editorial positions, were exactly what was needed to protect the legacy of our work in Germany. Harrington finished. A mutually beneficial arrangement. Until now, Catherine said, understanding dawning. Until you realized you were dying and couldn't control things anymore. Precisely, Harrington nodded approvingly. Cancer has a way of clarifying priorities. I have perhaps 2 months left. Enough time to ensure my legacy remains intact, but not enough to leave things to chance. So you sent Blackwood to eliminate all loose ends? Jonathan concluded. Me, Catherine, Marcus, Eleanor, anyone who might expose the truth about Phoenix? A regrettable necessity, Harrington agreed. Though I admit, bringing you all together like this is more efficient than I'd hoped. Blackwood's idea, actually, quite clever. Blackwood remained impassive, his weapon unwavering. The files, Captain Hayes, transfer them to this. He tossed a small device onto the desk beside the computer. All copies, all backups. Jonathan hesitated, his hand hovering over the keyboard. And then what you kill us all, stage it as a murder-suicide. Another tragic Hayes family drama. Something like that, Harrington confirmed. Though I'm open to negotiations regarding your son, he's innocent in all this. After all, how generous, Catherine said bitterly. 32 years of separation, and now you offer mercy as if it's yours to give. It is mine to give. Miss Reynolds, everything about your life for the past 3 decades has been mine to give or take. Harrington's cold eyes moved to Marcus. Your mother's career that mysteriously stalled after such promising beginnings, your father's rise to media prominence, the custody arrangement that kept you apart, all orchestrated to maintain control. You're lying, Jonathan challenged. The custody battle was my decision, to protect them from you. Harrington smiled thinly. Was it or did you pursue custody because certain influential parties suggested your son might be safer under your protection, because certain threats were implied if Catherine maintained custody? Jonathan's expression faltered as the implication sank in. You manipulated the entire situation. Of course I did. Did you really think you were the master strategist? Jonathan Harrington's condescension was palpable. You were a pawn from the beginning, a useful one, I grant you, but a pawn nonetheless. As they spoke, Marcus had been scanning the room, noting exits, potential weapons, the positioning of Blackwood relative to Harrington. His composer's mind, accustomed to tracking multiple musical elements simultaneously, cataloged these details almost unconsciously. The files, Captain, Blackwood repeated, his patience visibly thinning. Now, Jonathan turned to the computer, his fingers moving over the keyboard. You realize this won't end with us, he said conversationally. Robert built redundancies into the system. Dead man switches. If we don't perform certain actions at certain intervals, everything goes public automatically. A bluff, Harrington dismissed. We've had years to study Robert's security protocols. There are no dead man switches. Are you certain? Jonathan's fingers continued typing. Certain enough to bet your legacy on it. A flicker of doubt crossed Harrington's face. Blackwood, verify what he's doing. As Blackwood moved closer to the computer, Jonathan subtly adjusted his position, appearing to yield space while actually maneuvering the other man into a specific position, his back now to Marcus. Marcus caught his father's intent immediately. Their eyes met briefly, A lifetime of emotional distance dissolving in a moment of perfect understanding. Eleanor Washington, Marcus said suddenly, drawing attention to himself. She's already gone public, hasn't she? That's why you're here personally instead of letting Blackwood handle it. Harrington's expression betrayed nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. Marcus, Catherine warned, sensing the tension building but not yet understanding the plan. The jazz tribute concert last month, Marcus continued, taking a step to his right, further distracting Blackwood. Eleanor dedicated a piece to a soldier who gave everything for truth. That was Robert, wasn't it? She's been leaving breadcrumbs for years, waiting for someone to connect them. Enough, Blackwood snapped, turning slightly toward Marcus. The files. Hayes. Final warning. In that moment of divided attention, Jonathan struck. His elbow connected with Blackwood's wrist, sending the gun clattering across the floor. Simultaneously, Marcus lunged for the fallen weapon, while Catherine grabbed a heavy brass lamp, swinging it toward Harrington. The senator, despite his illness, moved with surprising agility, dodging Catherine's attack and producing a small pistol from his jacket. Enough, he shouted, his weapon trained on Catherine. Step back, all of you. The room froze in a deadly tableau. Marcus with Blackwood's gun now pointed at its former owner. Jonathan positioned protectively near Catherine, and Harrington holding his pistol with the steady hand of a man who had ordered deaths from behind desks for decades. A valiant effort, Harrington acknowledged, but ultimately futile. You forget, I've been orchestrating events from the shadows since before you were born. Young man. This last was directed at Marcus. I survived Germany, congressional investigations, 3 marriages, and 7 presidential administrations. Did you really think I'd walk into this situation without contingencies? As if on cue, footsteps sounded on the stairs behind them. Everyone tensed, expecting more of Harrington's men. Instead, Eleanor Washington descended into the room, her silver hair gleaming in the dim light, her movements graceful despite her age. And behind her came David Chen, Jonathan's executive assistant, along with 2 men whose bearing screamed federal agent. I believe, Eleanor said with remarkable composure, this is what they call a Mexican standoff. Harrington's expression hardened. Washington, you're supposed to be in custody. Your men were quite polite about it, Eleanor replied, settling herself against the wall as if attending a social gathering. Unfortunately for them, they didn't realize David here has been monitoring Jonathan's security protocols for years. When Blackwood's access patterns changed, he became suspicious. FBI, Senator, one of the agents confirmed, his weapon trained steadily on Harrington. We've been building a case against you for some time. Ms. Washington has been most helpful. You've been working with the FBI, Jonathan asked Eleanor, disbelief evident in his voice. Not initially, Eleanor admitted, but after Robert died, after I learned what had really happened at Than Hoa, I needed to ensure his work wasn't in vain. These gentlemen approached me about 3 years ago, after certain Phoenix files were declassified. This is absurd, and Harrington sputtered, though his hand holding the pistol had begun to tremble. You have no authority. I have connections. Not anymore. The agent interrupted. Your connections have been distancing themselves ever since your medical diagnosis became known in certain circles. Rats leaving a sinking ship. Senator Blackwood, seeing the situation deteriorating, made a sudden move toward the stairs. The second agent intercepted him smoothly, taking him to the ground with practiced efficiency. Marcus, Catherine said softly, her eyes never leaving Harrington's weapon, still pointed in her direction. The gun. Marcus understood immediately. The danger wasn't over. Harrington was cornered, dying, with nothing left to lose. Such men were unpredictable. Senator, Marcus said calmly, keeping Blackwood's weapon steady. It's over. Your legacy, your secrets, they don't matter anymore. What matters is what happens in this room, right now. Harrington's gaze shifted to Marcus, something like respect flickering in his cold eyes. "You sound like your uncle," he observed. Robert had that same annoying moral clarity. "Put the weapon down, Senator," the FBI agent instructed firmly. "Don't add murder to your charges." For a moment, it seemed Harrington might comply. Then, with startling speed for a man so ill, he swung his pistol toward Jonathan. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." Hayes. Multiple events happened simultaneously. Marcus lunged forward, attempting to knock the weapon aside. Catherine shouted a warning. Jonathan moved to shield his son. A single shot echoed in the confined space. Harrington staggered backward, a look of profound surprise on his gaunt face as a crimson stain spread across his immaculate shirt. He looked down at the wound, then up at Eleanor Washington, who stood with a small silver pistol in her steady hand. "That," Eleanor said with quiet dignity, "was for Robert." Harrington collapsed, the FBI agents rushing to secure his weapon and assess his condition. In the chaos that followed, Catherine found herself beside Marcus, both of them watching as Jonathan approached Eleanor. "You've been carrying that gun for 30 years, he asked her softly. "I never had occasion to use it," Eleanor replied, surrendering the weapon to one of the agents. "But I always knew this day might come." As medical personnel arrived, as Harrington was stretchered away clinging to life, as Blackwood was led out in handcuffs, the three Hayes family members found themselves drawn together in the center of the room, surrounded by the evidence of a past that had shaped them all in ways they were only beginning to understand. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, the question encompassing far more than the immediate situation. Jonathan looked at Catherine, then at his son, this remarkable young man who had somehow found his way back to his origins, despite decades of careful separation. "That," Jonathan said quietly, "is entirely up to us." In the background, Eleanor's recorded piano solo continued playing the same melody that had haunted Marcus his entire life, that had formed the foundation of Catherine's lullaby, that had carried Robert's coded truths through decades of silence. 3 generations of the Hayes family stood listening, finally united by the music that had always connected them, even when they didn't know it. Outside, dawn was breaking over Boston, golden light seeping through the dusty windows of the abandoned jazz club. A new day, and with it, the possibility of beginning again. Sometimes the most powerful symphonies are those composed from broken notes. 3 decades of silence have given way to truth. A family fractured by war and woven back together by the very melody that once tore them apart. The price of their reunion written in blood, some fresh, some long dried in the jungles of a conflict most have chosen to forget. Jonathan and Catherine will never recover the years lost between them, nor will Marcus reclaim the childhood that might have been. The wounds of deception have left scars too deep for perfect healing. Yet in Eleanor's weathered hands, they found something perhaps more valuable than an unblemished past, the courage to forge an imperfect future, together. The truth about Phoenix remains classified in government archives, but it lives now in the music that passes between them, father to son, mother to child, generation to generation. Some secrets are meant to be buried, others demand to be transformed into something that heals rather than destroys. As dawn breaks over Boston Harbor, 3 silhouettes stand against the light, not quite whole, not quite broken. The melody that haunted them has become their bridge across time. What melodies haunt your family's silence? What truths might be hiding in the spaces between the notes that only you can hear?